I love stealth games. The story behind that is actually pretty odd. I used to play the Chamber of Secrets tie-in game a lot when I was a kid, and it had these night sections where you had to sneak around Hogwarts, avoiding detection. Those were my favorite parts of the game. Ever since then, I've been hooked on stealth games. So I wanted to talk about those on this channel. I thought long and hard about what game it should be, then it hit me. Every piece of modern stealth design and mechanics can be traced back to one single game. Looking Glass Studios' 1998 release, Thief: The Dark Project. You play as a thief named Garrett who operates in a metropolis simply named The City. It's set in a medieval steampunk fantasy setting with many twists and turns. This game is fucking absurd, in the best way possible. You go from doing simple burglary jobs to tricking Satan himself, or this world's equivalent. It was the first stealth game to really incorporate sound and visibility. Some surfaces make more noise than others and you can literally hide in the shadows. This happy accident of a game practically spawned a whole new genre. This game has one of the most turbulent development stories in the industry, so let's talk about that. The game began development in 1996 and would get overhauled quite a few times over the course of this process. Designer and writer Ken Levine wanted to make an action RPG and came up with many different concepts, my favorite one being Better Red Than Undead, which was supposed to be a zombie game set in the Soviet Union. He initially wanted to make a game with sword fighting at the focus, but that idea was quickly put down. The concept they began taking seriously was Dark Camelot. Sword fighting was still the focus here. It would be an inversion of Arthurian legend where King Arthur was a tyrant and Mordred was a misunderstood hero. They even made a trailer for it that wasn't released until 2013. Although they fully began working on this title, many still didn't understand it and others had no clue what they were doing or what was going on. The game did have some basic stealth elements where you could steal, so designer Paul Neurath pushed for that to become the entire game, and in 1997 they decided to go in that direction. The game underwent a complete overhaul. Even though they had found the game they wanted to make and they were all on board, it wasn't smooth sailing. In mid-1997, Looking Glass ran into some serious financial trouble. Branches were closed and employees were laid off. The team's already suffering morale had just taken another huge blow. A year later, in summer 1998, the team had to work tirelessly on fixing the countless glitches and bugs. The exhaustion of this led many more workers to quit, but as the deadline approached, they had fixed the vast majority of the issues and now morale was beginning to rise. Thief: The Dark Project was released on December 1st, 1998. On November 2nd, 1999, they released Thief Gold, which was a definitive edition of The Dark Project, and it featured new missions as well as a few reworks. The game was met with critical acclaim. The experimental playstyle and freedom it offered took the gaming world by storm. The game basically ended up being two-faced. It had the stealth-focused sections and then the supernatural fantasy sections. The stealth sections were the ones that were most loved by everyone, even though those were the ones that Looking Glass was the most worried about. The supernatural sections did receive some criticism as the game would devolve from a fun experimental thief simulator to a basic hack and slash. The fan missions were arguably the best part of the whole experience. Thief's community remain active to this day, so more and more missions are coming out. It also got an unofficial expansion pack by modders called The Black Parade, which honestly deserves a whole video on its own. Being from the 90s, the game will obviously have some trouble running on modern PCs, but you can download tfix, which basically mods the game to make it suitable for modern PCs. It also comes with graphical enhancement, which I didn't use because I wanted it to be as close to the original experience as possible. Now that we know about the game's inception and critiques, let's dive into the game itself to get a first-hand impression.
Choose your weapon now. Try readying your sword and then your bow. You can always...
Before each mission, you get a quote. This one is from one of the Keepers. Who are the Keepers? Well, that's explained in the following cutscene. Here we get Garrett's backstory. He was a kid living in poverty, stealing to get by when he tried to pickpocket a member of the Keepers who obviously notices. But he is impressed that Garrett was even able to spot him. As he talks, this distorted drone swells in the background. This game's score is very industrial, which suits the setting very well. They then take Garrett in where they teach him everything they know. This is the tutorial mission. Here you learn the basics of stealth, how to use shadow and how to move quietly. You learn movement and fighting, that's basically it. But towards the end, Garrett says this.
The Keepers were training me to be one of them, but I found other uses for those skills.
This shows the kind of man you're playing as. Someone who wants to solely work alone so he can reap all the benefits. After that we get this cutscene which seems to be taking place in a chapel. Here a bunch of what seems to be monks are writing and locking away their secrets. The cutscenes in this game are awesome. They're very stylized and full of unique character. We read more from the Keepers. They talk about Garrett's departure, saying he did it out of anger and that he has lost his balance. They say he is the most skillful of them all and that they will continue to watch him. Now we are introduced to this mission's objective. You have to steal a silver scepter from Lord Bafford. At the start of each mission, you get this screen where you can see your objectives. These vary depending on the difficulty you're playing on. They usually go break in here, steal thing, and take this amount of loot with you. Some missions do have quite unique objectives though. Then you get to buy equipment for the missions. For this one you have your sword and your blackjack, which is a club that you can knock people out with. Then you have your arrows. There are quite a few different types that are introduced throughout the game. Right now you simply have standard arrows and water arrows, which can extinguish torches, candles, so on and so forth. It's also here that you can spend the money you earn from each mission. For this mission they do still hold your hand a bit. They tell you exactly how to get in and where the scepter is. As you spawn in, the atmosphere really hits you. It's great throughout the entire game. The dimly lit, claustrophobic street with the faint howl of the wind really gives a certain feeling of loneliness, but generally oppressive emotions come from the atmosphere. Getting into the manor is quite simple. Just go around the side where you find this strong guard and just take the keys to the well right off him. Go in and splash. Now you just have to swim a bit and then you can walk straight into the basement. Now we can talk a bit about the map. It uses the basic north up, south bottom orientation, but it doesn't show exactly where you are. It only highlights the section you're in. Back to the basement. In here the atmosphere gets tense. This is the first time the player is in real danger and the game obviously knows it. This faint droning music plays as you move through these dark cobblestone hallways. Shortly after you overhear these guards.
I've been thinking. The sir could really beef up security some.
What do you mean? What's wrong with us?
Well, we're fine. But I've been thinking we should watch the outsides.
That's stupid. People to worry about there on the inside.
No, then you catch them before they get inside, you taffer.
Oh!
One of the funnest things in this game is overhearing conversations. You can tell that the devs had a lot of fun with this. There's not really anything else down here other than loot. Then you get to the manor itself. It has a pretty simple layout, some basic halls and hallways. This is also your first real encounter with the guards. You gotta slip through their patrols. You learn pretty quickly to move quietly unless you're on carpet or grass. Eventually you make it to the throne room. Getting in is actually a little hard for first-time players. There is one single guard guarding the entrance. On Expert, you can't kill, so you gotta get a little creative. But inside the throne room, you find the scepter. Garrett laughs to himself about how pretentious having a throne room in your manor is. Now you gotta get out. You can't go back the way you came, trust me, I tried. Instead, you gotta find a gate to get back out into the street. After that, the level is done. This is a great first mission. The game basically gives you a showing of its strength right here in the beginning. A cool atmosphere, some patrolling guards, and overall great level design. It does hold your hand a bit by giving you the locations of your objective, and all in all, it's just not a hard or confusing level. It feels more like a practice run after the tutorial, like you're not there yet, you gotta test yourself a bit. From here on out, the game is gonna let you go completely and just let you figure everything out by yourself. It can be quite overwhelming at first, but eventually you get addicted to the freedom. In this mission, we gotta save Cuddy the Fence so he can pay us for the Lord Baffert job. This level is quite different from the last one. First of all, it's daytime, and instead of being in a city, you're out by a mine. You gotta go up through the mine and the factory to get to the prison. Now you have moss arrows. You can shoot them at any surface to make them dead silent. The dungeon setting of this level gets used quite a bit throughout the entire game. You spawn outside. As soon as you get into the mine, you encounter a new enemy, the zombie. They're very slow, dumb, and comically easy to run away from, but you can only kill them with holy water or fire arrows, and they make this horrific sound. You also meet the spider, which can tie you with web projectiles, but doesn't have a lot of health. This spider straight up dodged my arrow. On normal, you can take the elevator straight up to the upper mines, but on expert you have to do some caving. Up here you get some holy water to deal with the zombies. When you move towards the factory, you encounter this skeleton that shoots its skull at you. I just don't know where this came from, but trust me, by the end of this video that's gonna be the most normal thing you've seen today. When you get to the factory entrance, you meet the Hammerites for the first time. They're my favorite faction in the game. I just love how they talk.
Receive thy pounding!
Now we're back in the castle setting. You gotta find a way to the prison. One of the first parts you get to is this area with metal floor. Metal floor is basically impassable in this game. Every guard will instantly have your location uploaded the second that tiny clank echoes. For like a whole hour, I thought I had to find a way to open and go through one of the gates. Although you can go around that way, you can also just bypass it altogether by finding this little wooden bridge and crossing the entire factory on it. You do have to move quietly though, because the whole factory is almost riddled with guards. After that, you get to the prison. You overhear another conversation. They're talking about Cuddy and you hear where they're keeping him. In cell block 4. These cell blocks are really well designed. They're incredibly dark, claustrophobic, and it just looks filthy. Inside this guard post, you can open the cells, but to get there you have to play red light, green light with this guard for a little bit. That's another thing, this game requires a lot of patience. You get in there and see that Cuddy is in cell 6. When you get to Cuddy, he's about to drop dead. Garrett says they're friends, but they talk to each other like they're just business partners that put up with each other. He tells you that he can't pay you, but you can steal Quintus' horn down the bone herd as payment. He tells you you gotta go to a safe in the officers' quarters for some notes, keys, so on and so forth. After that he drops dead. When you get to the officers' quarters, the music gets tense. There's something so eerie about listening to the guards going about their day whistling with that music in the background. They're so blissfully unaware of the lurking shadow. When you get upstairs, you approach this hammer as a bassy choir takes over the percussion. This fits the Hammerites quite well, since they're basically religious fanatics and hammers are their holy symbol. You steal the key from this guard and open the safe. The mission ends. This mission was a bit of a diversion from the Gothic manor atmosphere of the previous level. It gets some of it back once you enter the prison, but in the mines it has more of a dungeon crawler feel to it. I think it's safe to assume that that came from the game's Dark Camelot phase. This level gives you a bit more freedom than the last. I like how they're kinda easing you into the overwhelmingly free design of the game to come. I didn't like this mission as much as I liked the previous. I think some of the weaknesses are starting to show here. Before this mission, we get some more text. This time it's not from the Keepers, but from a Trickster song. It reads like a Gollum quote with all the beastesses and treesies. Here we hear of the Woodsy Lord, which is important later. It also refers to humans as man-fools. In the following cutscene, Garrett decides to go after the horn because his rent is due. He has to reach the tomb of the Quintus family where he can find the horn. The place is also haunted, so you gotta get some holy water. As you spawn in, you are met with a very gothic atmosphere. Everything is dark, run down, and feels very lonely. When you enter the tomb, you meet a single zombie that's easily taken care of. As you walk further into the tomb, you can hear a horn echo through the long dead halls of the tomb. The tomb is a bit confusing because it's mainly composed of these cram hallways, so it's easy to get lost or disoriented. You gotta watch your step, though, because some traps are scattered throughout the place. After dodging traps and looting some chests, you get to this part where you enter a cave. Here the game fully commits to its dungeon crawler aspect. You move through the cave and fight the different beasts lurking within. You encounter these weird lizard things called burricks that shoot poison gas or something like that. Eventually you get to this part of the tomb. Here you can find the corpse of a thief that has tried to make it through the tomb to no avail. Here you get fire arrows. You can use them against the undead, haunts, and torches. Now you've got some more caving to do. You find this other area with another dead thief. You get back into the cave where the faint echo of the horn returns. You know you're getting close. As you enter the main tomb, this soundbite plays. You think that it's just part of the score, but then Garrett comments on it being a tomb with pipe-in music. This area has a lot of zombies roaming around, but with the fire arrows it shouldn't be that big of an issue. You gotta climb these towers. Inside you find some strange contraptions. As you climb higher and higher, the horn gets louder and louder. Eventually you find it on this podium. After taking it, the mission ends. This mission almost completely abandoned the stealth aspects of the game. The game's strength lies in its moody atmosphere and the tense heist missions. Like some of the critics say, it devolves from an interesting experimental stealth game to a simple hack and slash. This mission was really quite boring, honestly, and it's not the only one like this. Before this mission, we see more from the Keepers. They speak of an ancient corruption that has been contained and that none of the other factions can be trusted with it. In the following cutscene, we're introduced to Farkas. His prices are high, but Garrett can buy things there without being taken advantage of by the city wardens. They've been after him for years. Right after the mission starts, Farkas gets assassinated. The assassins mistook him for Garrett. Now you gotta follow them back to find out who hired them. This is a really cool section. You move through the claustrophobic streets in the dark. Once again, it's very gothic. You find out that they were hired by a man named Ramirez. Garrett decides to teach him a lesson by stealing his most prized possession. By the entrance, you hear some guards talk about how the Hammer's lack of new recruits is slowly ending them. It's a really cool way of showing the world building. You overhear guards talk about your objectives, but also about what's going on in the city. Now we're back to where the game is strongest, infiltrating and stealing without detection. As you enter the building, you discover that it has a very similar tone to Lord Bafford's. It's really cool. When you get out into the court, you overhear two guards arguing about their job, and one of them threatens to quit. Shortly after that, I had this really tense moment where they approached the hallway I was in. I had no other choice but to just bite the bullet and hope they didn't spot me in the shadows. They didn't. They went right past me without noticing a thing. It's moments like these that really stick with you. They're so fucking tense. My heart almost jumped out of my chest. This court is really important though, because this is where you learn to lockpick. The lockpicking is pretty simple. You just switch between different ones at certain points. There is no minigame or nothing. When you get through here in the basement, this music starts playing. It kind of feels out of place to have that playing over a game with a medieval aesthetic. The score feels out of place multiple times throughout the game. Down here you find Ramirez. He's pretty easy to deal with. You can just go straight up and bonk him. On the counter you find the assassination order. You take his purse and the objective is complete. But you still need to steal for a value of 1,000. In the basement, you can also find this pit with a monster in it. If you go back upstairs to the barracks, you can find the assassins you followed earlier. After getting the loot, the mission is over. This mission was great. It goes back to where this game is best. After the previous mission, this was a joy to play. It was very simple, but the map was cool and the atmosphere was fantastic. It has a very gloomy atmosphere and you just sneak around and steal stuff. It's good fun. Loved it. Before this mission, we read from the Hammer Tenets. They speak of how the Builder granted humans the hammer so they no longer had to live as thieves. To reject the hammer is to reject the Builder. Garrett is now after a vase. The Thieves Guild beat him to it, so now he has to steal it from them. You have to go through a restaurant, down through a gambling den, and through a secret door to get to the thieves' hideout. This is one of the missions that were added to Thief Gold. I'm gonna be honest with you, I fucking hate this mission. It is super confusing and just a complete maze. Figuring out where you have to be is damn near impossible. The first part is pretty cool. You move through the restaurant and get into the gambling den. It's a little hard since the den has quite the attendance at the moment. Here the confusing part comes. I accidentally walked straight into the guild and the sewers instead of heading into the Overlord's Fancy, which is where you need to go to begin with. But that's not all. When you get into the hideout itself, it's almost impossible to navigate properly. You have no idea where you should even be to begin with. I wandered around confused for over an hour until I pulled out a guide and found out how to get into Lord Rubin's house to get the Donald's safe key. After that, you just head straight over there and steal the vase. Like I said, I really didn't enjoy this mission. The map layout was incredibly confusing and the directions were unclear. This could, however, just be my own idiocy. Maybe there's something I missed. It was, however, a soul stealth mission and no hack and slash, so I guess that was nice. That level is immediately followed by my favorite in the game. You get contacted by a woman named Victoria with a client who is very impressed with Garrett. She wants him to steal a magical sword from a man named Constantine. He is a new face in the city, but he mainly keeps to himself. Breaking into the mansion is pretty routine. The dark atmosphere persists and you have a few guards outside to take care of and you get in. There are multiple ways to get in. I got in through the main door. The lower floor is pretty normal, but when you get to the second floor, things get very weird very quickly. The hallways are crooked and there are strange contraptions everywhere. You enter these tunnels that you can use to get around. Here you'll find a spiraling room and this room that's just emptiness with 2 stone platforms. You can find the sword on the 3rd floor, where I used a rope arrow to get to it. Rope arrows are really cool. You shoot them at any surface that sticks, and then a rope comes down for you to climb on. After getting out again, the mission is over. In the following cutscene, Garrett goes to meet the man who wanted the sword. He reveals that he is Constantine and he wanted to test Garrett's skills. He's been watching him for a long time. Now it's time for the real job. Constantine wants an eye from an abandoned cathedral. You have to go get it. The cutscene itself is actually really cool. It looks like silhouettes of real actors. You notice that throughout their conversation, weird things are growing on the floor and they finish each other's sentences. The game continues this dreamy aesthetic, which I find really cool. Like I said, this is my favorite level, and it's solely because of the design. Like, who would live in a house like that? It looks like something straight out of a dream. It's super cool. Like always, the gameplay is just awesome in these stealth-oriented levels. In the opening text, we hear from a Hammerite. He speaks of when their faith in the Builder was put in danger as hordes of zombies ravaged the cathedral grounds. They did end up winning, and the people casting doubts were dealt with. In the following cutscene, Garrett speaks of these rumors with the hordes of undead beasts. He has a map of the abandoned part of the city that contains the cathedral. You have to make your way through the ruins to get to the eye. This is another hack-and-slash level. You meet 2 new enemies here. The apparitions, they're basically ghosts, and the Craymen, who are these human-lobster hybrids. You fight through caves and ruins until you get to the cathedral. When you climb up here, you meet the eye itself. It tells you that you need to find the 4 talismans to enter. Each talisman is tied to an element. It tells you that you can find them in the Keeper's Grotto, which is nearby. You have to stand on a pedestal and illuminate a statue by lighting the torches next to it. You can do that with fire arrows, but my dumbass had already used them all, so I had to play Dora the Explorer for 40 minutes until I finally got my hands on 2 and was able to enter the grotto. First, you gotta solve this pressure puzzle. When you get inside, you find this note that says that the talismans have been hidden and are no longer present. They were hidden to prevent them from falling into the wrong hands. In the other note, they mention the trickster again. In the other room, you find the location of the various talismans. The talisman of fire is in the Lost City, the water one is kept in a shrine in some cavern, the air talisman is with the Hammerites, and the earth is with the Hand Brotherhood. You also find out that the stone in the library is a portal key to the Lost City. In the last part of this level, you gotta get back out. The ruins begin to swarm with the unholy undead, and it's a bit of a fight. I didn't really like this level that much. It went back to being a basic adventure game, which is where this game is at its weakest. It does, however, have a really cool atmosphere. Other than that, nothing worth noting, really. We hear from the Keepers. They speak of a force that resides outside the city. The extent of its power and whether it's malicious or not is unknown. This mission was also introduced in the Gold Edition. Now Garrett introduces us to this mission's objective. You have to steal the Earth Talisman from the Hand Brotherhood who reside in these mage towers. They are supposedly very powerful. This level is close behind the sword as my favorite level in the game. It keeps the dark gothic atmosphere and throws in some more absurdness. In the start of the mission, you can make your way to the library where you get a sure location of the talisman. It's being kept in the treasury upstairs in the main building, but we need a key to enter. The main building is surrounded by 4 towers, 1 for each element. The key is in the fire tower, but we need a key to the fire tower as well, and here we get the main structure of this mission. You have to climb each tower to get a key to the next. Each tower has its own layout and challenges that all fit the element they represent. First, you need to go to the water tower. The water tower is really easy. There are no patrols and all you do is just swim up here to grab the earth key. The earth tower is a bit of a challenge. You have mages patrolling and you gotta use these platforms to get around. Watch out, they can crush you. You find the air tower key after moving through these maze rooms. The air tower is a bit similar to the last apart from the colors. You have to make your way through the tower on these moving platforms. Then you get to this chest where you have to time its descent so that you can lockpick it and take the fire tower key. The fire tower is definitely the hardest. It has the most patrols and you gotta navigate some pretty treacherous catwalks. They have these plates that will heat up. Touch them once and you're dead. When you get to the chest that holds the treasury key, you have to watch the floor because it is composed of those metal plates. You have to move between different plates while lockpicking and stealing the key. Now it's pretty simple. You just have to make your way to the main tower and take the earth talisman. Watch your fingers though, if you touch the wrong one, you lose some health. After that you can escape through the sewers. Like I said, I really enjoyed this mission. It was big, but its layout wasn't confusing. The towers were fun to navigate through and it had some hard parts, but it was never frustrating. First, we see the keepers write about ancient knowledge that needs to be preserved and protected. Then we get this mission's objective. You can use the keystone to get into the lost city. It's an old part of the city that was buried underground after some catastrophe. This is where we can get the fire talisman. This level combines the more linear dungeon crawler aspects with the stealth aspects. You have sections where you move through underground caverns where you fight monsters, including a new enemy called the fire element. It's a floating fireball that shoots smaller fireballs at you. You can take them out with a single water arrow. The atmosphere of this level is really cool. It's very hellish with the caves, lava and fire. In the first part you just move through old structures, fight monsters and platform across the ruins. You have to be careful because mages are patrolling various parts of the city. These areas also have movement activated lights, bringing a new challenge. What I love about this game is how the devs keep throwing in new elements, so you will have to switch up your playstyle and develop new strategies throughout the entire game. I actually got stuck here because you need a lever to extend this bridge that leads to the arena, but the lever was nowhere to be found. It was across the entire map, so I had to take a 30-minute detour. After extending the bridge, you can head straight to the tower that holds the talisman. You climb all the way to the top where it's waiting. After picking it up, you gotta make a chaotic trip back to civilization. The fireballs pick up drastically and you basically have to just run out and hope for the best. After getting out, the mission is over. I can't decide whether I love or hate this level. It had some good stealth sections, an incredible atmosphere, but it also had these mundane supernatural sections, and the map was a bit confusing. Before we begin here, we get another section written like Gollum. It further references the Woodsy Lord and Man-Fools. Now you're introduced to the mission's objective. You have to get the water talisman from caverns below the city. Garrett knows a man named Geary who lives down there that can point him in the right direction. Shortly after entering the caverns, you find Geary dead, entangled by spiders. You can find his diary next to him. He writes of a sudden migration of spiders. This first part of the mission is really linear. You just go through the tunnels and take out any enemies foolish enough to face you. Then you encounter this singing man named Raoul. He begins singing about his life. He lost the opera house to a Lady Valerius. He then explains that the lady has taken the talisman out of the caverns. Now you have to break into the opera house and steal it. Raoul plays out an imaginary scene about Valeria's reaction after you steal it.
I, Lady Valerius, am so sad. Where has the treasure gone that once made me glad?
He decides to help you because if Garrett stole the talisman, she would be sad. He gives you a map and a key. He plays you out with his magnificent voice.
Now go, go, go! Up the rope you go, why do you move so slow?
You come out of a manhole right by the opera house. Thankfully, this is a stealth-oriented level. Getting into the opera house is actually quite hard. You have guards walking around outside and guards on towers looking over the entrance. Inside you have more guards marching around. Despite being shit, I somehow managed to enter without being seen. Upstairs the difficulty spikes a bit. Many guards are patrolling these hallways, and the door you have to enter is blocked by another 2 guards. I ended up just fighting them. Behind the door you find this library. In here there's a note from a flute player calling in sick. There's also a key that you can use to open this chest where you find the talisman. Now we have 3 out of 4. You know the drill, now you just gotta get out and the mission is completed. I like this mission. It sort of baits you into thinking you're gonna do more dungeon crawling, but then you get what you want. Another dark, tense stealth level. I also like how it's leaning away from the supernatural things again. I'm not a big fan of the supernatural aspects. I think that the mages and the weird architecture suits the game very well, but the monsters are just either annoying or boring to deal with. We get an extract from a Hammerite sermon about how they have to take their role seriously and do their best or bad things will happen. A lot of these pre-mission texts are quite cryptic. Sometimes they're a little hard to understand if you don't know the lore. In this mission we have to steal the Talisman of Air from a hammer temple. Because of the sheer amount of guards, Garrett has to go in using a disguise. He dresses as a hammer novice so that he can roam freely around the temple, but there are restricted areas that you gotta look out for. They're marked by a red hammer. You approach the main gate and they let you inside. Now you can freely walk the temple grounds without having to think about staying in the shadows. But watch out for the red hammer. You discreetly take loot here and there, and then you find the talisman back here behind these bars. To get to it, you have to pull 5 levers within 5 minutes. I really struggled with this. I am not good at this game. I ended up just running through the guards, pulling the levers, but when I got back to the talisman, I couldn't take it. Then I found out that you have to read the wall builder prayer, which you can find in this room next to this book. Then you have to read it before grabbing the talisman. After that, I just bolted out of the temple. This was a really cool level. They switched it up by giving you a disguise so you only had to sneak in certain areas. It also has a quite chill atmosphere because you can just walk around. I said it earlier, but this is a clearer example of it. The devs are really good at switching things up. The stealth missions all have a unique character. The gameplay loop stays fresh throughout the entirety of the game. You read from the Smith in Exile again. He tells of taking revenge and on his enemies and that his brothers foolishly agreed. Now that we have all the talisman, we can return to the cathedral and retrieve the eye for Constantine. Many unholy beasts roam the place, but Garrett can use the cloister gate as an exit. Garrett wants to retire with the huge sum that he was promised by Constantine. As the mission starts, you stand before the cathedral. You plant the talismans and enter. You're immediately greeted with the groans of unholy beasts. The cathedral is full of zombies, ghosts, and a new enemy, the Haunts. They are basically undead swordsmen. They're exactly like the guards, but spooky. You can sneak around to get to the eye, or you could do like I did, where I somehow managed to alert every enemy in the cathedral, and one by one they came into this room where I sent them back to Helheim. After taking the eye, it challenges you to escape in one piece. You begin making your way to the cloister gate. Then you meet Murus. He is a ghost now. The cloister gate is locked and he will help you, if you can finally put him to rest by performing the proper burial ceremony. For the next 45 minutes or so, you go around collecting the objects necessary. First, you have to find his rosary. You can do that in this place called St. Joras. Obviously, zombies and whatnot are patrolling. Here they don't give you any other option than stealth because there are just so many of them. Honestly, big credit to the sound design. I mean, just listen to the zombies. That's so uncomfortable to listen to. It keeps you jumpy and on edge. After finding the rosary, you have to get a holy symbol, which in this case is a hammer. You have to go to the forge. You can make it with this mold. In here, while looking around, I also got the candle before I was actually supposed to get it. Now you gotta fetch the prayer book. This part was super tense. Seemingly out of nowhere, two zombies will just barge through the door and a haunt is just down the elevator. Then you have to sneak through more ruins to get it. After that, you have to go to the cemetery to perform the ritual. After that, you get a way out. Murus gives you the key to the armory, where you can find an explosive. With a fire arrow, you can blow up the cloister gate. That was that for this mission. Now with this cutscene, the game fully commits to its absurd aspects. They explain to Garrett that the eye is defective. Both Constantine and Victoria begin to change as more things grow from the floor. Garrett obviously only cares about getting paid. Then it's revealed that Constantine is the trickster, the Woodsy Lord. From what I could gather, he's a god of chaos that takes the devil's role in this world. They steal Garrett's eye so the Woodsy Lord can make the stone eye see with the ritual. He plans to destroy the man-fools with it. Garrett passes out. We hear more from the Woodsy Lord as this really creepy distorted reverse speech can be heard in the background. Then Garrett wakes up, still in Constantine's manor. Some keepers find him. They cut him out and tell him that he's been going downhill ever since he left. Now Garrett must aim the momentum at Constantine so he can save the world. But first we gotta get out of this building. This level is super simple. All you have to do is just get out. But the place is very hard to navigate. I ended up just running until I eventually found an exit. We are introduced to the Woodsy Lord's henchmen. They're these weird creatures with swords that sound exactly like Gollum.
We take him!
The way they speak and the tone of their voice is just Gollum. You also meet these mantis men that make these weird insect noises and move incredibly slowly. I have no clue how the devs came up with this shit. I wouldn't be surprised if some of them did like 10 Datura seed pods and then decided to make their trip the ending to the game. It's a really creepy level as well. The way they yell for you is just so weird and unnatural. But yeah, all you do in this level is escape the manor, so not a lot worth noting here. It's also really short. Most missions in this game lasts around an hour or two. This one only took 15 minutes or so. This is the penultimate mission. Before this mission we hear from the Hammers. You can sum it up with do not succumb to evil but thank the builder for the challenges that have shaped you. In this mission we have to go to the Hammer Temple to get their help. Garrett is surprised that the trickster is real. The Hammers have always believed in the trickster, so if anyone knows how to stop him, it would probably be them. You begin by approaching the temple. As you walk through the streets, you see bodies lining it. When you arrive, the temple has been ransacked and is overrun with Constantine's creatures. You have to find the remaining Hammerites. You enter the dungeon below where more beasts roam. Eventually you get to this pit where you have to make your way down. Luckily this part is quite easy, even if you're spotted the fight isn't too hard. You meet some of the Hammerites by this opening. They agree to help you if you can save their high priest. They give you a map and a key. You can use this raft by the docks to escape with the priest, but being the dumbass I am, I prematurely let the raft go. I didn't think much of it in the beginning, so I continued looking for the priest. Down below there is this part where all the weird guards are just walking in place. I don't know if it was a bug, but it was pretty damn creepy. It's here that you find the high priest. He's unconscious. Now I had already let the raft go, so I tried swimming with him, but he kept drowning. I ended up just walking all the way back to the trapped Hammerites. When you've done that, the mission is over. This mission was actually really cool. It's set up like you had to sneak past the Hammerite guards without hurting anyone, but then you're faced with such a tense twist as you arrive. It's really well done. The tension that comes from not knowing how many of Constantine's henchmen are still roaming amps up the atmosphere. The mission was pretty easy though, and not exactly long. I did encounter a bug where I couldn't talk to the Hammerites through the opening in the cave. I had to restart the entire mission. I got through it in roughly 30 minutes. We are now at the final mission. By the way, if you're still watching, you're a GigaChad. Here you have to stop Constantine's ritual. You have to swap Garrett's eye for a booby-trapped eye. You perform many impressive feats throughout this game, but can you rob a god? You start right after entering the Trickster's realm. Then you have to make your descent deeper and deeper into this cave. You dodge Constantine's mantis men and the weird lizard guards. Again, the absurdism of the level's design is just so charming. It looks like a fever dream. There's this section where you gotta follow the flow of the water and it flips upside down and stuff. Physics are gone here, it's dark, everything is twisted and there's lava. This level just has a very hellish atmosphere. Then you reach Constantine and he's in the middle of his ritual. He has the eye on a pentagram and is moving to each edge while saying some really devil-like things. After replacing the eye, you just gotta wait for him to finish the ritual. Then when he goes back to the eye, he's killed. After that, you get the ending cutscene. Garrett is warming himself by a flame when he is approached by one of the keepers. The keeper says that even though Garrett can't be one of them anymore, he is going to need their help soon. Garrett insists that he's through with that life and has retired. The keeper tries to convince him, but he doesn't budge. The keeper leaves us by saying everything is as written, the trickster is dead and the Metal Age is upon us. After that, the game is over. It's no wonder why Thief the Dark Project had the impact that it did. This game is one hell of a ride all the way through. It provided a freedom that had never been seen before. In the stealth levels, you are free to move about as you please and complete it however you want. It has a very detailed stealth system that takes visibility and sound into account. Without this game, there would be no Dishonored, no Hitman. However, in the hack and slash levels, it becomes more linear. Those levels are without a doubt the weakest parts of this game. You get bored and just want to get back to the fun, rewarding stealth missions. But the mechanics are not the only thing that makes this game stand out. It's the aesthetic itself. It's incredible. There are so many visually interesting things to look at. The absurd design of the levels make the entire game feel like a fever dream. I have no idea how they came up with half the stuff in here. This game has character. A thing I don't think I've really touched on yet is the game's use of horror elements. Not just through the monsters and beasts, but through its generally tense atmosphere. You are constantly on guard while playing this game. The setting is cool and unique. I haven't heard of medieval steampunk fantasy until this point. To get through this game, you have to be very careful and very patient. If it wasn't for the dungeon crawler aspect, this game would be perfect in my eyes. The story of this game further adds to the overall absurdity. You play as a self-centered thief who gets drawn into a cosmic mystery. It starts by having you do simple heist jobs for clients so you can get paid and eventually retire. We only hear of the antagonist in the background with those texts in the beginning of each mission. Then he is finally revealed a full 12 hours into the game. He is some god of chaos that is out to destroy the man-fools. You end up destroying him instead. But that brings the Metal Age, which is also the title of the sequel, which we'll get to in the next video. Anyways, that was all for today. Please like and subscribe. Bye.